What do you know about our 27th President of the United States, William Howard Taft?
He was a robust gentleman who got stuck in a bathtub.
You are half correct there. He never got stuck in a bathtub, which is the only thing anyone really knows about him. You know what I love? Every president has that one myth about them that, even though it's not true, we keep repeating. And Taft, unfortunately, has the bathtub myth. For those of you who don't know, which is none of you, because it's literally the only thing we're taught about Taft in school, he was our largest American president. And the rumor is that he got stuck in the White House bathtub and 4 people had to lift him out. The origin of that is one person who worked at the White House for 42 years wrote this tell-all memoir about, the secret lives of presidents. That was Erwin Hoover spread that rumor, and it went like wildfire. And of course, that's, we'll get into this a little bit more when we get into the details of this guy's life.
Sure.
But ultimately, I think this is a matter of legend becomes truth, print the legend. Because I can't imagine if we had to memorize one fun fact about the guy, that it would have something to do with the Ballinger-Pinchot affair.
What was that?
We'll get there. But I have a lot of respect for our 27th president, and one of the reasons why I picked him for the first episode is I think he deserves a review. He seems like a good person to start this out with, because it is easy to justify wondering whether or not he deserves to be one of the mediocre presidents, as The Simpsons called it. And we're going to go ahead and launch into some of his biographical details. Now, on this show, we're going to begin this segment, which is called Before There Were Presidents, also known as Things I Read on Wikipedia Earlier Today.
You're so smart, Pete.
I know. I never get enough credit for that. But William Howard Taft was born in 1857 in the great city of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah.
He is one of several presidents from the great state of Ohio, but he was one of those people that was really clearly born into privilege. His father, who was named Alphonso Taft, underrated name. Alfonso needs to make a comeback. So Alphonso Taft, his father, had been the Attorney General and Secretary of War for Ulysses S. Grant, also an Ohio president. You're going to see that theme a lot, by the way.
There's a lot going on there.
But back to William Howard Taft. He was born into privilege. Obviously, his dad was very well connected. His father was also a judge who ran for governor of Ohio, but lost to Rutherford B. Hayes.
What?
I know, another Ohio president. Like I said, they all know each other. So he went to Yale College, where he graduated second in his class, and no joke, really disappointed his dad by doing so.
What?
I know. Second in his class in Yale, and it's like, I have failed as a father.
I mean, it's pretty good.
I couldn't even get into Yale, and this guy is second in his class. But you know what? He did finish first in one thing. He was the heavyweight champion of wrestling on the Yale team. Bam.
I really was proud when I graduated community college.
It's the little things.
Little things.
And again, if you want to do a psychoanalysis on William Howard Taft, it seems like he came from one of those awful families, as evidenced by the fact that he graduated second in his class in Yale and disappointed his dad. You can see what this guy accomplished so much in his lifetime, because it was just like, oh my God, I was only president of the United States and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. My dad is turning his grave. I was only in charge of 2 of the branches of government. Oh my God, I've never served in Senate.
If you're not first, you're last, Pete.
Exactly. If there's any reason why William Howard Taft is mostly forgotten, it's because he graduated second in his class at Yale. So after graduating from law school, he became a prosecutor. What's really notable about this guy is that he became a judge at 29. So he was appointed to a position in the Cincinnati Superior Court, always chasing the, daddy's approval, But it was around this time that he met Helen Taft, it wasn't named Taft at the time. That would have been creepy if he married his cousin. So he he met his future wife, Helen, who we called Nellie. So Nellie Taft, her father, and then, Taft's future father-in-law, was a law partner with Rutherford B. Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes, for those of you who don't know, because he is, again, a forgettable president. became president, and so Nelly's family went to the White House to visit them. Wouldn't it be cool to have that kind of family connection? Just like, oh, let's go visit my college buddy. Oh, where? The White House. But it was an extremely important moment for Nelly because it was that moment when she went to visit Rutherford B. Hayes as a kid that she decided her ambition in life was to become First Lady.
Oh.
I know. Pretty much everything I've ever read says that Nelly was the super ambitious one of the two. And if you look at it, this was before women could vote. So becoming First Lady really was the most powerful position a woman could aspire for at the time. If Nellie Taft were alive right now, obviously her goal would be to become president.
Obviously.
But at the time, every lady, I guess, wanted to be First Lady. So anyway, William Howard Taft and Nellie got married and had 3 kids. One of their kids, Robert Taft, did go on to become a senator. So it's a nice Taft legacy. And by the way, that also means that the Taft family had all 3 branches of government represented. Bam.
Ew.
Take that, Alfonso Taft and his disappointment. So he was appointed a judge before he was 30, which is pretty impressive.
Pretty good.
And then another Ohio president reared his head in, Benjamin Harrison, who I know you are very familiar with.
Yes.
Benjamin Harrison, also the grandson of William Henry Harrison, who's also from Ohio.
Yeah.
Again, there's 100 people that lived in Ohio at the time, and they all went to potlucks together.
Just
so
a
Benjamin
successful
Harrison,
bunch, those Ohioans.
I know. I would also like to take a moment to say I'm also from Ohio, so bam, it
There you
continues.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer's also from Ohio, so again, they're not all winners.
They can't all be winners, Pete.
I know. You get out of a few. So William Howard Taft made a name for himself in the Cincinnati Superior Court, and also he was super duper connected. Again, this guy's dad used to, be a Secretary of War and Attorney General. So Benjamin Harrison appointed him as a circuit judge at the 6th Circuit, which represented 4 different states. Continued to make a name for himself, and then he was actually, I skipped a step that's really important. When he was 32 years old, he became the youngest to date Solicitor General in the Justice Department. Then he was appointed a federal judgeship, which he held for 8 years. So the guy's doing all right for himself. And by all accounts, he really loved his life as a federal judge. Who wouldn't? Because William Howard Taft's ambition was never to be president. It was just motivated by the fact that his wife really wanted to be First Lady.
So he was operating off of getting his wife and his daddy's approval.
Oh, isn't that just very human though?
There is a lot to unpack there.
There's a lot, and there's even more. So while he was working as a Solicitor General, he became friends with another up-and-coming politician named Theodore Roosevelt.
Wow.
As we were discussing yesterday, these two became best friends, and they were the original Bill and Ted, which I love, and I did not even connect those dots until yesterday. I was like, Bill and Ted, and their excellent adventures.
I love it.
So he became best friends with Theodore Roosevelt, who, spoiler alerts, did get carved into Mount Rushmore. So another Ohio president comes into play, William McKinley. I swear we are almost out of Ohio presidents. I'm not going to make this entire show just dropping the names of Ohio presidents, but it's kind of crazy how connected they all are. So William McKinley was elected president, and his vice president was Theodore Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. That part becomes much more important very soon. So William McKinley knew what a constitutional jurist William Howard Taft was and said, would you be willing to lead a commission in the Philippines? This is right after the Spanish-American War. So the Philippines at the time was a U.S. territory. For those of you who don't know, after the Spanish-American War, afterwards, we forced Spain to give us all of their territories. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. And then we wound up, paying $20 million, as to, a sign of thanks. But the Philippines was considered to be an extremely volatile territory because there was that whole indigenous population being like, hi, we just got done with the Spanish making our lives miserable for a couple hundred years.
Who are you?
Americans, and now the Americans want to take over. Okay, we got some methods of defense.
So did they fight an entire counterinsurgency campaign against us? Is that what happened?
Essentially, yeah. Well, there was a war, so the U.S.-Filipino War, again, there's so many key players here, but Douglas MacArthur's father, who is named Arthur MacArthur,
That's unfortunate.
What kind of parent names their son Arthur if the last name is MacArthur?
Not a loving one.
Dr. Seuss nonsense right there.
Not a loving parent.
That is the opposite of Alfonso Taft. That is a sad name.
Yeah.
So General Arthur MacArthur.
Yep.
That's never not going to be funny to me.
That's amazing.
So General Arthur MacArthur was the military governor, and then William Howard Taft became the civilian governor, and the two did not get along because Taft's approach was very diplomatic, whereas MacArthur just kind of wanted to blow up the population. Caveat, just so we don't get sued by the Legacy of Arthur MacArthur Fund or something like that. It was much more nuanced than that, obviously.
So what you're saying is William Howard Taft was more of a, hey, let's just, kind of a hearts and minds. Let's get to know them. Let's see what they want. Let's bring peace to the region, because looking at it from, a diplomat is going to look at things from a diplomatic point of view. A military general is going to look at things from the most aggressively dominant perspective, right? So, different perspectives apply in different times and things make sense in different areas, right? But in counterinsurgency campaigns, much like Taft was probably trying to avoid, he could say, hey, maybe if we talk to the people, we don't have to kill them, right? Am I close there to what happened?
Oh, no, you are 100% on the mark there, especially about the whole hearts and minds thing.
Yeah.
So Taft brought his whole family there, and he and the family learned Spanish. Something that I really wish was photographed or filmed or something is that Taft learned the official dance of the Philippines.
Really?
I don't know what the official dance of the Philippines looks like, but I really wished I could see Taft to do it.
Sure.
Because that just sounds funny. But he and his family were really big on making the Filipino population feel included. So whenever Nellie would host some sort of big event and they would do a weekly social, she would invite the Filipinos into her house and, just sort of you guys are my host. I'm your host. You guys are my guests. And it was considered very, groundbreaking. This is the early 20th century. And here's this well-connected white family that's letting the local Filipinos socialize with. Everything I've also read makes a point of saying, yes, Taft was progressive at the time in terms of his attitude towards the Filipinos, but it was very much it's I trust the Filipinos to follow my lead and to adopt our culture.
Sure.
Again, because this was at the time, this was us saying, we don't trust you to run your own government yet. So Taft openly said, it's they need to be governed by us for a while before we can let them. Meanwhile, the Filipinos hi, we've existed for, hundreds of years. But what's notable about William Howard Taft's time in the Philippines is that he actually helped draft the Constitution for the Philippines.
Sure.
To include modeling their Bill of Rights after our Bill of Rights.
That's cool.
So that's, if it seems like a random thing for a judge to just be made governor, keep in mind, he was made a judge because he understood our Constitution so well.
Yeah. It sounds like he kind of knew, and again, it was 100 years ago, right?
A
little bit more.
121 years ago.
So for the time,
I watched it for the math.
For the time, he sounds super progressive, and I have to imagine the choice was his way or MacArthur's way. And I'm glad that he figured out a way to get everybody through that whole thing alive, or at least the most amount of people alive that he could. Sounds like a stable guy, right? Just a stable, consistent dude who's level-headed. Am I wrong there? Because I don't know anything about it.
That's the vibe I get. I do want to say I found out recently in terms of the stable part.
Yeah.
I mean, because the guy was a judge, so he obviously had to be very even-headed. However, when he was a kid, some journalist had mocked his dad in the papers. So Taft, as we've mentioned, was a champion wrestler.
Oh.
Found this guy and bashed his head into the sidewalk.
Oh.
Several times. So it's okay, so you know what? Even if you have the cool head of a judge, sometimes you lose your cool. Plus, I would not want to be one of his kids. I imagine every once in a while that the judgeship thing probably didn't last with the kids long, Yeah,
you can't bash people's heads into the sidewalk, man. That's a no-go.
Thankfully, his dad was Attorney General, so I think he got up with a fine. Yeah, I
Oh,
think he
man.
was okay.
Fair. Ohio, man, what are you gonna do?
I know. Plus, if he killed a guy, I mean, then Ohio would only have like 99 people living in it. So he had done such a great job in the Philippines. Taft was considered as a Supreme Court candidate twice while he was governor of the Philippines and turned it down both times. And again, this is his dream job, is to be in the Supreme Court. The guy has no desire to be president of the United States. But he turned the 2 spots on the Supreme Court down because he was focused on his job as civilian governor, which I think is super commendable. It's not every day you get offered one of the highest positions in your field and then say, you know what, no, I this whole Filipino dance thing, like, I gotta get this down, otherwise it's gonna be super embarrassing. But Teddy Roosevelt made him Secretary of War, and Taft only decided to do that because being Secretary of War at the time, which is a precursor to Secretary of Defense, meant that he still had oversight on the Philippines.
Because at the time, the Defense Department was named the Department of War, right? So as of now, we call it the Secretary of Defense. Before they changed it from the Department of War to the Department of Defense, it was the Secretary of War. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Boom.
It's for those of you listening who don't know, we actually are both veterans, so we're a little connected to the Secretary, the War Department / Defense Department. As Secretary of War, he was really accomplished. From everything I read, he was the most traveled diplomat at the time. And among his responsibilities as Secretary of War, in addition to the Philippines, he oversaw the construction of the Panama Canal. And this is an important detail considering where I live right now. But I was reading about the Taft. You know what? Let me avoid the actual name because I'd have to Google that, and that seems like too much work. But
Why
bottom
put
line up
work
front.
into it?
But one of his missions was in 1905, he went to Japan to talk to the prime minister at the time following the Russo-Japanese War. And one of the agreements that they did come to was that the United States would not intervene in Japan annexing the Korean Peninsula as long as Japan also promised not to invade the Philippines, which was Taft's, big project. By the way, spoiler alerts, after Taft died, Japan did wind up occupying the Philippines as they occupied most of the Pacific. Whoops.
I was like, no, the second you said that, I'm like, well, that did not last long at all.
Yeah. That's the hard part about having 2 world wars. There's plenty of opportunity to undo the things you didn't do the first time.
Yeah.
So considering that I live in South Korea right now, it's kind of amazing to think that, if Taft did not agree to the clause of, oh, yeah, you guys can invade, Korea, whatever. That's not important. It's insane. It's like just the little moments that like absolutely changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
So Teddy Roosevelt did not want to run for re-election in 1908. So he said, hey, buddy, I've basically been shaping you up to be the next president, so it's yours, which obviously made Nellie happy. So William Howard Taft wound up getting elected president in 1908, starting in 1909, and immediately hated it. And now we get to the part of the show which we call While in the White House.
Oh boy. Now,
I really tried to make William Howard Taft's tenure as president interesting, but it's hard.
That's
I can spout, I know. And this is exactly why William Howard Taft isn't a very remembered president, because like just going through the notes, I mean, like, yeah, it was 4 years, so stuff happened. But what it comes down to, he was not a very popular president, especially considering he had just followed Teddy Roosevelt, who was just one of the most iconic and memorable human beings that ever lived.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, if we're going to get into the presidential scandals, and by the way, our next episode's on Warren G. Harding, so we got some fun scandals ahead of you. I
love it.
Just stay tuned, everybody. But William Howard Taft campaigned on a promise to lower tariffs, and he did lower some tariffs, but other tariffs went up. Oh, the scandal. The biggest scandal of William Howard Taft's career, and the reason why he and Teddy Roosevelt splintered as friends, was essentially Teddy Roosevelt, again, handpicked him to be his successor and said, anyway, so basically what I need you to do is be me for 4 years while I go to Africa and hunt, wild animals. That's not a joke. That's literally what happened. He went to Africa for a year to hunt big game, came back and was like, what? My best buddy isn't being exactly like me?
Do you think that he became president because Roosevelt reminded Taft of his father, who he was deeply trying to impress because he came in second at Yale? And so his best friend is this like super, like the prototypical masculine American man, right? Like if you want to learn how to be a masculine American man in the traditional model, you study Teddy Roosevelt, right? The guy formed a militia and fought the Spanish for funsies, right?
I that is a great observation.
And I'm like, oh, well, that's why, because like he thought, oh, maybe if I become president, Dad will finally love me.
Spoilers, his dad never loved him. All right. So Taft promised to keep most of Roosevelt's cabinet and then didn't. Most controversially, his Secretary of the Interior, because Teddy Roosevelt may have been some tough alpha male war hero, but the dude loved the environment, was a conservationist. So he appointed Secretary Ballinger as the Secretary of the Interior, who cared significantly less about the environment. Long, boring story short, it resulted in Taft that Ballinger butted heads with the head of the Bureau of Forestry, which is Roosevelt's baby, and then wound up firing him, which completely shattered the friendship between Taft and Roosevelt. By the way, real quick interjection, because it's amazing and it's much more interesting than the rest of Taft's presidency.
Sure.
Billy Possum.
Do what now?
Billy Possum.
What's that?
All right. We all know what a teddy bear is.
Yes.
And we know the story of the teddy bear, which
What's
is that. All right. So Teddy Roosevelt was hunting with some friends, and they decided to give him an easy victory, which is they tied up a bear to a tree and go, "Oh, we found you a bear. You can shoot it." He was like, "No, I like to hunt. You found a bear. You incapacitated it and tied it to a tree."
What?
Who do you think? I'm literally Teddy Roosevelt. You don't think I want to hunt this thing in its natural environment?
I feel like Teddy Roosevelt wanted to kill it with his bare hands with no guns.
Oh my God,
like...
Teddy Roosevelt would have wrestled it to death, but he wouldn't want to shoot an unconscious bear.
And then if the bear killed Roosevelt, he would have thought that was a good death, like Batman in The Dark Knight Returns.
So back to Billy Possum. So Teddy Roosevelt inspired the teddy bear because of that story. The teddy bear became a runaway success Christmas present. All the kids in the country wanted a teddy bear. But Teddy Roosevelt was no longer president, so they thought, well, this is just a fad. We got a new president. We should have a stuffed animal based off of him.
Yeah.
Which was why Billy Possum comes into the fold. So, whereas the story of the teddy bear says much about Teddy Roosevelt's character, the story of Billy Possum unfortunately also says something about what we know about William Howard Taft. He was at a dinner once, and they're like, well, Mr. President, what would you like for dinner? And he goes, possums and potatoes.
Ugh.
Yes. So I would love to see the look on the waiter's face, because it's the President of the United States. You kind of got to give him what he wants. It's like, I'll check the kitchen. And so, sure enough, they found him a possum.
Probably in the trash can.
Oh, yeah, And it became national news that the president ate a possum.
It's weird.
So naturally, they were like, well, okay, we have an animal to associate Taft with. Surprisingly enough, they could have just done a walrus. I mean, the guy had the mustache. And so Billy Possum was introduced, and it was even marketed as, it's like, this is the new teddy bear. But because Taft was not a very popular president, and Teddy Roosevelt is still beloved, the teddy bear obviously destroyed Billy Possum, and then that just became a footnote in history.
Obviously. Yeah, no.
That possum may not have been dead until Taft started to eat him.
It's unfortunate.
Like, okay, I'm gonna fake it. Oh no, it's Taft. I'm doomed.
That's unfortunate.
It is. It's not a very cuddly animal.
No.
It's a bit rodenty.
No.
To be fair, bears aren't really cuddly either. They want to eat you.
He should have gone with a puppy. Everyone loves puppies.
Oh yeah, unless you're allergic or a cat person.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you this. The rivalry between Taft and Roosevelt goes beyond stuffed animals. I know it gets complicated.
Talk to me.
So Roosevelt was furious with his old friend and tried to get the Republican nomination back from him for the 1912 election.
Sure.
And Taft, who did not like being president, ran again out of spite.
Mm-hmm.
And Roosevelt founded his own party, the Progressive Party, also known as the Bull Moose Party, out of spite. That is how petty these two best friends became. That they ran for president just to piss each other off.
That sounds like a lot of work.
That is a lot of work. You know what? Like, we're friends, but I don't think I would ever run for president just to spite you.
I mean, if it was the bowling league, I would.
Oh my God! You know what? That's my bowling league. I'm gonna found my own party, and I'm gonna run against you.
I will burn this bowling alley to the ground, Pete.
So the Republican ticket was split. Although split is probably not the right word, because Teddy Roosevelt kicked Taft's ass at the election. Taft wound up winning the fewest number of electoral college votes of any incumbent president, and they both wound up splitting the ticket in that sense. And Woodrow Wilson became president. So now we know the rest of the story.
The rest of the story with the rainbow and sparkles.
We are finally done with the 4 least interesting years of William Howard Taft's life. In fact, he even said, "I don't remember ever being president."
Wow.
All right. And you know what? A lot of people have that in common with Taft. Don't remember him being president.
My favorite politicians are the ones that I forget are in office. Like the governor of my state, for a good long while, you forgot he was there because he just kind of faded in the background. Or like, I like that about him. What's his name again? Like, he was never in the news. It was great.
So now we get to the happy ending of William Howard Taft's life. So following his time as president, he went back to Yale to teach law. And then we get to our final Ohio president. And again, our subject for our next episode, Warren G. Harding.
I love it.
Appointed him Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And Taft. Wrong T president. We'll see if we get to Trump.
It's fine.
And we're kind of going out of order here. But so Taft wound up getting his dream job and became the only person to have served as both president and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And unlike his time as president, William Howard Taft was considered to be one of our best Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and was often basically said that he treated the position with more gravitas than he did as president, because that's what he wanted. And it's also a great example of, just patience pays off. So he was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for the last 9 years of his life, and only resigned a month before he died.
Oh, wow.
So, and another detail, I know I've told everybody this, I think that the Taft family was instrumental in literally shaping D.C., which, if you haven't been, is a beautiful city, because Taft was the one who came up with the idea of the Supreme Court having their own building.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever been seen the Supreme Court building, that was his idea, because prior to that, the Supreme Court met in the basement of Capitol Hill. They were essentially treated like a janitor's guild,
like a bingo parlor at a church Sunday.
That's what I hope it was. I literally hope it was just a dank basement, and it's just 9 judges sitting around like a poker table. So what do you guys think? Billy, they don't serve possum at the vending machine, okay? You're not going to like it. So, in addition to the Supreme Court building, his wife went on him that diplomatic trip to 1905. You know, the one where they said, "Oh, feel free to invade Korea, just don't touch the Philippines."
That one.
Yeah, that one. So that important trip that kind of shaped where I live right now.
Yeah.
So Nellie Taft went on the trip, and she saw the cherry blossoms and thought they were so beautiful that she convinced Prime Minister of Japan to donate 3,000 cherry blossom trees to DC. And now every year, thousands of people go to DC for the Cherry Blossom Festival. So people that were considered pretty unextraordinary did a pretty great job of literally shaping the way that we see DC. So fun facts about Taft is that he was the first president to actually be president for all 48 contiguous states, because New Mexico and Arizona joined the Union while he was president.
Sure.
So the last 2 duty stations I've been at are because of Taft, indirectly.
So you feel
thank
like
for
this
that.
deep emotional like bond with him, like you, and I could see in our discussion. Well, first of all, this is almost like a professorial lecture, right? Where you're like, oh,
You would never know my chief source of information was Wikipedia.
there you go. And it's almost like all of you're seeing your life reflected in President Taft, right? And there's a lot of like overlap there. It's insane. Like
There is.
duty stations, Korea, Ohio.
I will say this: the guy could grow a better mustache than me, which brings us to trivia point 2.
Hit
He
me.
was the last president to have facial hair. Bam!
Wow.
I know. You know what? As people have pointed out before, if you're going to be the last president to have facial hair, have a super duper walrus mustache. I mean, like, the guy rocked it.
There you go.
One thing that's notable about him, he was the first president to have a scandal related to how much he golfed.
What?
He was a very prolific golfer, and in his time, he was the first president to ever have the pundits be like, get off the golf course and back to the Oval Office. So, you know what? He set a trend for a lot of presidents to come.
Like if that's, and maybe it's just because like I've only lived in the 21st century, but like, oh, if that was only the only scandal our president had was, he kind of like hangs out the golf course too much. Like, oh, dare to dream.
And really, if again, the thesis for this whole episode is if there's a reason why we cling to the bathtub jokes and the fat jokes, it's because the rest of his career, just the rest of his presidential career, was not that memorable.
Oh.
So the most important question that we have regarding our presidential podcast is it was uncovered through one of Warren G. Harding's mistresses that he nicknamed his penis Jerry. So Derwin and I are going to question what we think William Howard Taft would have nicknamed his penis. So Derwin, would you like to go first?
Laffy Taffy.
And then the actual answer that I think, and I would be very surprised if he didn't nickname his penis this, is he was a judge, so he'd have called it the gavel. And our last question is, after everything that I've presented, do you think that William Howard Taft deserves to be a forgotten, mediocre president?
I think that he is somebody that our presidents should aspire to, because
By being boring?
Oh my God. I look at him like he's the sort of guy I aspire to, right? Who's just like stable. And, I don't want to make any like deals with Japanese so they can invade Korea. But, like somebody who's not like, just stable and boring and like kind of consistent. It sounds like he was kind of just like a guy who did his job and then went home to Nellie and, showed her the Laffy Taffy.
So my opinion is I think he's earned his spot as a forgettable president, but has absolutely earned his spot as one of the most interesting Americans of at least the 20th century.
Sure.
Who definitely deserves to be more remembered than he is. And if I can do my part to make him memorable for something other than the bathtub thing that never happened,
Yeah.
then, I think I've done my job.
You're doing the Lord's work, Pete.
And yeah, indeed. Well, I'm doing Ohio work. All right. For all of you that were listening to our first ever episode of the Dead President Society podcast, we appreciate you checking in and hope you will check in later.
Bingo, bango, dodge, Durango.
Indeed. So stay tuned for our next episode on Warren G. Harding, aka the possessor of Jerry.
Yes.